Um, so I think we're gonna start out by just orienting everybody to this call. Prior to 2025, there was a different format where usually people would show up if they had any questions, concerns, or if they wanted to get a little bit more of an education on how GIST can be used in practice, how they can be employed in different projects. So we're hoping to carry that as well into this year, and we wanted to create an open forum in case you wanted to have any uh, particular use cases you wanted to discuss. Otherwise, in subsequent meetings, we're going to have presentations prepared as well. Um, but if you've been following along through LinkedIn, we've been posting a little bit more on GIST and showcasing how it can be used. And we also delivered some material through the Enterprise Data Transformation Symposium in February. I'll be happy to share the YouTube playlist we prepared from that as well. Um, Jonathan, you mentioned you were starting to get back into semantics in your organization. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to sort of talk through in relation to GIST? No? Nothing in particular? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I found the components for the product module very helpful. But yeah, no need to, don't have anything to share now. This is more for learning since I've been focused on DCAT and CSVW.
Well, maybe Dave, Dylan, and Rebecca, we could talk a little bit more about the latest developments that we've had mapping BFO and GIST, and then some of the immediate things that we have on the roadmap. Dylan, do you want to
take that one, Dylan? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I can say a little bit about the GIST BFO mapping efforts. This is something that I think we recognized a couple years back at this point was a potential need to map from GIST into BFO. There was an interest from some of our clients for that connection, and then more recently, BFO has been adopted as a quote unquote baseline standard in the Department of Defense and intelligence communities. And so there's actual requirements to align with BFO. And what we saw is an opportunity to allow folks to use GIST, which comes with its own advantages. It can kickstart domain ontology modeling, given its common sense terminology. You can start with GIST, model out your domains of interest, and then you essentially get BFO for free. You get alignment to BFO classes. And so that's something we've been working on recently, and we've established an initial mapping, and it's actually currently in development. It's something we're ironing out some of the details and improving it with some folks who are BFO developers at the moment. And so that's kind of where things stand. We've got an initial version of it. Should be even better in the future.
Is it publicly out there, Dylan?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
available now in our
Yeah.
GitHub repository. So if you go
Okay,
out there,
yeah.
I can actually put a link in here
Yeah.
for folks to go to. You can go out there, take a look at it, pop it into Protege, and see how it works. Yep.
Is there a released version, or are people just going to be working on, picking up one of the branches, or what?
Yeah, so the place would be there is an official release,
Okay.
and that would be on the main branch. So that's the place to go. There is a release package that could be downloaded too. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. As of yesterday, in a conversation with John Beverly, the University at Buffalo. They would like to initiate an informal conversation between you, Dave McComb, the semantic arts leads, and University of Buffalo at a closer collaboration regarding the integration of GIST and BFO. So they're finding interest in this and looking for a closer partnership and association with semantic arts.
Cool. Do you know, are they involved in the CCO or not?
Oh, big time.
That's too bad.
Yeah, there is. I was in 4 hours of meetings yesterday with University of Buffalo and the DoD IC group that's adopting the GIST BFO, and they want to push and are pushing towards mandating CCO, but there's trouble in River City, and so the leadership of the CCO is reorganizing and rethinking and making it more. They're contemplating a trend to more GIST like as opposed to as detailed as CCO is now.
Well, that would be a step in the right direction. I mean, I sort of feel sorry for anybody who's required to use CCO.
It's the pushback from those of us who were trying to deal with CCO that has caused this reconnoitering on their part.
You know, and I started writing a white paper. I was trying to do some mapping, and it's pretty diabolical to map to. But at the end of that white paper, I said, you know, maybe the easiest thing, they could just license GIST and call it CCO and everybody'd be happy. Well, not everybody, almost everybody'd be happy.
I just put the oh, thank you, Brett, as well. We put the GIST playlist from the Enterprise Data Transformation Symposium. There are modular presentations if you want to take a look and get oriented on what GIST is, upper ontologies, and why this is differentiated from other upper ontologies. I don't know, Dave, do you think it'd be appropriate to talk a little bit more about some of the GIST extensions we have in incubation?
Yeah, sure. Or I mean, and also maybe people just put in the chat what do they want to talk about. The two I guess I'm spending the most time with, as many of you know, I'm writing a book on data-centric accounting with Cheryl, who's on the call, and that and we want to make sure what we say in the book actually works. So we're applying that to ourselves. So we've got one extension of GIST for human resources, sort of, and a separate one for accounting. And when accounting and HR, you know, have a baby, that's payroll. But and then we have a professional services thing, which is also sort of nascent, because then we have to have our upper ontology for us. So working through that, literally on the airplane last night, still trying to work out some of how we think accounting is going to work in the future, and what does the ontology. The trickiest bit is we want to have an ontology that supports traditional accounting, you know, because many of our clients have traditional accounting systems. They're trying to move, you know, financial transactions from point A to point B and all their coding blocks and all that stuff. And yet we want to have a graceful upgrade, the same components, but arranged differently or added onto differently to get to the future. So that's what I'm working on. Hopefully, you know, have something shareable in the not too distant future. The other one that some other folks are working on is what we call GIST Pharma. We're trying to bring several of the really common but unique to pharma concepts into one place, just to make it easy to get extensions into whether it's R&D or operations or drug discovery or, those kind of things.
And so I'm working on the Just Pharma thing, and I can say that I have used the BFO bridge because the allotrope and the IDMP ontologies, among others, are defined in terms of BFO classes. So, yeah. So
Have either of you guys or your work with Beverly gotten to the bottom of the whole unit of measure thing?
Yeah, so that is one thing we chatted about actually last week, and we're thinking that goes into the generically dependent continuant category in BFO. That's where it happens to be in CCO as well. Thinking about these as repeatable things that can occur across magnitudes, I think is the idea.
I could have sworn in CCO it was in multiple places. Didn't they put units of measure for speed over there in the continuance, and they put the units of measure for mass over there in the occurrence, and it's like, whoa. Is that true?
You might be right about that. I'll have to take a closer look. I think where we did settle was generically dependent continuant, but you might be right about that because they've got a suite of ontologies right within the CCO, and not all of the developers necessarily collaborate amongst each other. Although there are efforts to get on the same page about that, but that kind of thing can happen where one developer might think it falls here, another somewhere else. So, yeah.
I mean, it's weird because it's kind of logical, sort of, that you would put your speed related units of measure over here with continuance, recurrent, well, whichever they are, concurrence. God, I get those mixed up, and your mass ones, but it's incredibly problematic when you want to, have more complex units of measure that are crossing over, because these things are disjoint, and I don't know. That was the bit I was struggling with.
Yep.
There's quite a bit of conversation as well around the namespaces and and this issue that you're just talking about here. Which namespace is my unit? Which namespace are my units of measure in? So
no, I think CCO actually made the right choice. Well, I think it's the right choice. I think they're all in the same namespace, aren't they? All 11 CCOs are in the one namespace, which I think is good for migration of concepts and stuff. It just makes that a lot easier.
They are, but there's a significant amount of conversation when people try to map to CCO from all of their namespaces, and
oh yeah.
So I'm just a little curious. Maybe Yakov, do you have any particular top of mind concerns in terms of GIST or any use cases you'd like to maybe implement it in?
I'm here to just learn about how GIST works as a good, well thought through ontology, and I'm just taking this as a learning experience and sort of to hear about the problems that you're dealing with. Now, my background is that I want to sort of somehow create domain models or ontologies semi-automatically with humans in control, with language models. And so for me, sort of, I'm here in order to understand the needs of potential customers or use cases, and also to feel about the problems which I will have to deal with when I get to the right level of my work. Now, I would be interested in one thing which I'm interested in, if we could talk about this. This relates to the book of Dave and Cheryl, I understand sort of that the semantic, data-centric accounting really starts with contracts. So you say that that if you speak about old-fashioned accounting, you say, well, it's about adding up numbers, maybe adding, subtracting numbers, and maybe classifying things to say, well, is that green or is that red? And when you go and you see, well, it makes some sense, but it's very technical and it doesn't really make deep sense. Sort of, you have to be an accountant to know all the rules in order to understand what you can make wrong. Now, when you read the book, you see that, well, actually all economic activity is born at a contract. When you say before the contract, you have a conception, you have people who want to work together, they want to create some economic value together, but as long as they don't shake hands and they don't sign a contract, they don't work together. And then you have some point when the minds meet, and then you create that contract. You say, now we do something together, we have a shared future together, and we execute on that. And this is a very powerful point of understanding that everything centers around contracts and what has been agreed upon, and whether this is unfolding in the future or not, and how. And then this is very powerful. And sort of, if we could get deeper into how contracts relate to just how the execution of contracts not only affects accounting, but also how it affects the whole business. Sort of, that would be this is a topic that would very much interest me, because also for different reasons I eventually decided that my focus is actually starting to understand contracts first before understanding anything else, because it's really a key, not only to the question of accounting, not only the question about economic value, but it's also a sweet spot of understanding documents on a deep level. That's my interest over here.
All that is so right on. And if you don't mind, I'll just respond in real time rather than putting something together, because it's obviously near and dear to Cheryl and my heart. We've been wrestling with this for quite a while, and all of your observations are dead on. There's a magic piece right in there, and it seems like sort of a detour, but we realized actually when we watched somebody and ourselves, we saw 2 case studies of somebody getting really close but then getting it wrong. And it revolves around, so there's a philosopher named John Searle who wrote a bunch of books about the relationship of words to the world and stuff, but he has this interesting observation that dovetails on what you were saying there. He says there's 2 ways that language relates to the world. He calls them world to word. In other words, if you're out there describing what you find in the world, which is a lot of information systems, a pharmaceutical assay system is describing the world, or if you measure anything, you're describing the world, or if you write a poem, well, not a poem, but if you write anything descriptive, you're describing the world. And there's a lot of our data is world to word. But the really interesting stuff and the stuff business and accounting is what he calls word to world, which is until the moment there's certain speech acts that create something in the world that didn't exist before that speech act. And signing a contract is the speech act. So right up, you can RFPs and quotes and intent and all this, but there's nothing created in the world other than a bunch of noise and some activity and stuff. When you agree at that exact moment, there's 2 mutual promises that came into existence and they're real and they come in at that moment. And then you have 2 sets of obligations, and most of business then is how you discharge and fulfill or change those obligations over time. And what's interesting, where the confusion was we have a tendency to think something like a purchase order is a promise, is one of these things. And there are commitment systems where people capture their purchase orders and they're going to keep track of the accounting of them. But if they slip up and think, if they confuse the actual structure of the record with the commitment, they accidentally get a whole bunch of purchase orders they think they're committed to, and they're not. Because you really have to, it's not the purchase order itself. That's just a draft. That's just an idea. It's not until it's mutually signed and agreed upon. And then all of a sudden, boom, the two commitments, usually two, sometimes more, come into existence. So, and then we did it ourselves. So that was, Cheryl was observing somebody who was implementing a commitment system and kind of got that wrong and sort of implicitly thought every time they created a purchase order, they created a commitment. It's because in old accounting, we usually don't type stuff in until after the fact. But now we're trying to get a little bit ahead of it, and it causes these false positives. We did it ourselves. So when we sign a contract with a client, we know what our invoice schedule is going to be for the length of that contract. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to just put them in our system, but they're not approved and they're not sent yet. And we were giving ourselves all these false signals that there was something that wasn't real yet. So anyhow, hope that helped.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a few words about how these concepts of contractual obligation are represented in GIST? So what are the parts of GIST which are needed for a minimal contract, and what are the extensions which I wanted to learn of for more real-life contracts?
Yeah. And the great news, and we always, this is part of what we try to do when we use GIST, is there wasn't a huge number of extensions that had to be made. There obviously are some, because GIST is not an accounting ontology, but a surprisingly small number, a manageable number. And most of them descend, there's a high-level GIST class called intent, which is sort of the teleological, it's where people intend and stuff. And so some of the things under intent are, for instance, product specification. That's your description of how you think products should conform to your idea of a product. But also there's commitments. And so the accounting is directly a derivative of commitment. And there's two main, pretty much all of GIST accounting revolves around what we now call a financial obligation and a financial right. And the only difference between those, when you enter into a contract, let's say I decide to buy widgets from you, at the moment we sign, I'm obligated to pay you for those widgets at some point in time, probably after you send them to me, but maybe before. And you're obligated to send the widgets to me, but I record that as a right. I have the right to receive the widgets from you, but that right 100% comes from your obligation. There's no innate right for me to get widgets. They only exist because we have a mutual obligation. And that's most of the rest of it. Obviously, we have in the book, we're working on what we call data-centric accounting 1 and data-centric accounting 2. The first one is much more similar to traditional accounting. So there are accounts. There are accounts. There's financial transactions, journal entries and financial transactions. You can sum them up and put them on your financial statements. And so those things, journal entry line items, we call them jellies, are events. They're descendants of events because they're things that occur in time and have some values to them. But you just add them up and put them on your financial statement, which we have a sub branch of content. I think we're now calling it generative content. It used to be called templates of in this case, there's a template of a financial statement. It essentially describes a model of how you want to report the financial information you have. And you instantiate that model with dates and a few things, and then transactions go into the model and you get a financial report. In DCA2, though, we're trying to get away from transactions traditionally and derive the accounting information directly from the status of the commitments. So
I love the way how you also structure this, that you get a lot of different ways, different facets or aspects of different kinds of transactions really coming out just from a very few characteristics automatically in the right way. So that you don't have to make a lot of decisions right, but you just follow the same rules to get the same to get correct numbers.
Yep. And I see a couple of hands, but I've got one last thought. This kind of blew me away, and I think it blew Cheryl away too. You know, I used to build accounting systems. I worked for Arthur Andersen, and I had at least kind of an appreciation of how complex accounting policy can be. You know, generally accepted accounting principles, hundreds and hundreds of pages, and every company and every industry adopts it differently in every company, and they have their procedure manuals and, you know, their chart of accounts. They're all different, and you have to figure stuff out. But you dig, and finally you go, wow, accounting policy is really pretty simple. You can express it as a table. Obviously, we'll express it as triples, turn the table into triples, but there's just a handful of things that anyone who commits the firm should know. Why are you committing us this and a few other things, and everything else just derives from that. There should be no human in the loop deciding what account or am I going to recognize this revenue now? No, you should set that once, set it and forget it. So let's see who we got. Rebecca.
Can I ask you one more question?
And Michael. What? Yeah, okay. One more question, but I'm not going to answer. I'm going to go to Rebecca, Jonathan. But you can ask it, but I'm not going to answer.
Okay. But the question, yes or no. I ask a question whether something is relevant or not. But the question is that in data-centric accounting, the idea of a contract, agreement, and a commitment is central. This is the root of everything else.
Absolutely.
If you go into data-centric architecture without accounting, is that same concept as central and as important, or is it not relevant as central?
I'll answer it later, but let's let everybody with their hands up. Have a turn.
Okay.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I just have a question about an earlier point you made that there are no obligations on either side until both parties have signed a contract. But isn't it in fact the case that if I sign and send it to you, I should put something on my books, because as soon as you sign, I have an obligation. Perhaps I have what we would call just a contingent obligation.
Exactly. And in fact, that's the equivalent of what an offer is. If I put an offer on my website, that's half of a contract. And if somebody accepts it, I don't get another shot at it. It's done. So yeah, offers are contingent obligations. Yep. Michael. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. When you did all the work with just accounting and you're doing some of the implementation, did you find it necessary to tweak or augment or change in any way the definitions of obligation and commitment? They always seemed tightly interlinked, and it was always a little bit of mystery how they related. I wonder if you had to update or tighten that up a bit.
Yeah, I skipped over them a tiny bit. I went straight to financial obligation and financial right, because I wanted those to be exactly, and they're what's mostly different about them is they have these properties, obligor, obligee. I realize it's a little geeky, and payor, payee, but with just those four things and who they're connected up with, not only can you know everything that's going on, you can literally share a contract. At the moment, everybody's contract is subjective. I think you're the counterparty, but no, really, contracts are shared, and the fact that you're the counterparty is because I'm the obligor of this obligation and the obligee on the other one. Jonathan.
Just let me quickly follow up to Michael's question, because in just 14 we have streamlined that part of the class hierarchy. I believe we've removed obligation and we have only commitment.
You're right. There wasn't a huge amount of difference there anyway. Yep.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yep, Jonathan.
Yeah, I just wanted to completely agree that their words describe the world, but words in this in the obligation, the contract, the agreement sphere, they do create reality. And that's critical to understand this area of the ontology and of the world. And then I just want to say that I don't love accounting. I've never been passionate about it, but I've worked with it in designing a data warehouse for accounting and just in small and large enterprises. So I've worked a lot with it. And I've not seen, I think what the GIST accounting components that I've seen are the very best way to model it. So I heartily think you've hit the nail on the head.
Well, took a lot of whacks. I got to tell you that. 2 years of whacking at my thumb. Joaquin.
Yeah, I was just more curious. Or over at Neptune, do you have a standard operating procedure for engaging with new client projects? Do you start with an upper ontology, or like how does that usually work if you're developing enterprise knowledge graphs?
We don't have a kind of strict process or procedure for that. And usually the customer engagement starts with just informal discussions with the customer, and almost like, let's draw on the whiteboard what your data looks like. And we have a lot of customers who are kind of new to knowledge graphs and new to anything about ontology. So there's a lot of like basic education that we have to offer customers, and a lot of, how should I say, hand-holding. But we, sometimes we say, well, there is an ontology that might fit your purpose. Other times,
Right.
we basically just hold the customer's hand and work on designing an ontology for that works for them. And we also don't have any kind of strict guidelines on, like, for example, which upper ontologies we like and which ones we don't like. So it's really kind of case by case basis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael Sullivan, did you have any particular questions or curiosities around just or even Siva? There you go.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not currently involved in any of the accounting side of GIST. We're mostly on the well, it's all about energy and water. So
Right.
So it's at the moment we have not gone there, and probably won't. It's not really under our umbrella at the moment. But I will say that it certainly has helped us bootstrap adopting and incorporating new data coming in from different types of utilities and things of that nature. I mean, I'm working on a brand new extension this morning to our existing ontology, and because things are so well structured, because of the GIST patterns that we've adopted, it's making it a lot easier to refactor, because I do have to do some refactoring, but it's straightforward.
Oh, that's great to hear. So, and what's the status on the energy and water thing?
Well, looks like we may have our first customer within the next month or so. So that'll be what we call LA, which is limited availability, and GA will be later this year.
That's great.
Yep, we're pretty excited. And the other thing is really, really interesting. It's something we hadn't quite anticipated, is that partners have suddenly shown a huge amount of interest in this because they are building apps on top of our ontology, which is really kind of cool. And so it's like, oh, okay, fine. You go get the customers, even better. Right? So we're and they're very pleased because it's basically done all the ugly and nasty work that just sucks all their energy and time, and they can very quickly put together a POC and show it to a customer within a couple of days, actually.
Wow. Well, have them show up to just forum here. Just what do we call this?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, and
okay.
we do have a SKU. There's now a page on Oracle's website, so we're official from an Oracle point of view. But until we really get our customers starting to use it, we're not quite there yet. Okay. But we're very close.
Cool. Is that link public? Can you send us that link?
I think it is. I'll go check. Yeah, sure.
Wow, that'd be cool.
I also see Siva and Aluri. Did you have any particular?
Siva,
hey, Dave,
Mike, how are you?
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we started with just certainly it actually helped us what ontology means, what upper ontology means. And as you know, by the way, I'm from Siemens PLM software. So we are basically a division of Siemens with $100 billion software revenues, pure software. So I think our problems are certainly very deep into the engineering space. We are able to build it thanks to Dave and Michael and Mark help. We build the cross-domain search. How do you search across electrical, mechanical, software engineering data? That's what we used it for. It's in production. Good to report that.
Great.
Yeah, I think, I mean, coming back to the gist, I think it is certainly a lot of abstract, high-level concepts. As a upper ontology, it has a lot of use. We can see that. But our space is a lot more deep into engineering than the business. But certainly we could have used it for business of engineering, not science and technology of engineering. We have to go much more deeper. And right now we are actually dabbling a lot with using ChatGPT, GPT 4.5, the latest model from OpenAI, how it could actually generate ontologies based on the use cases. So we are experimenting with that. For developing, obviously, our focus is on building software applications, and ontologies, I think, play a major role. Both for our existing ontology can be used for training the models, because rather than training the LLM models on a lot of individuals or instance data, if it can understand the ontology based training, it can with less amount of training data and cost, you could train the model about a domain. So that is what we are experimenting at this point of time.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Great to hear. You know, I just came back from Knowledge Management AI conference, and you know, one of the themes there was a lot of LLMs to generate, as Jakob was saying, at least a starter set or something that an ontologist could look at and say, oh yeah, that's right. No, not this. Yes, that. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of activity in that area pretty soon.
Yep.
Question to Siva.
Yeah, Michael.
And nice to hear you. Nice to hear your voice again. Are you, when you're experimenting with having ChatGPT generate an ontology, are you giving it an upper ontology and saying, take this content and expand the ontology starting with gist or some other upper ontology?
That is one scenario. You're exactly right. Because most of the time we have to derive domain ontologies from the upper ontologies. So it helps a lot for GPT 4.5 to generate a ontology by understanding the upper ontology. That's exactly right, Michael. That is one scenario. Yeah. But sometimes we may not have even the upper ontologies in certain areas appropriate. There we actually describe the domain in a short form as simply as a text document, and obviously it is reasoning inferring based on a lot of its knowledge to generate it, right? So there we are relying on the GPT-4's enormous general intelligence to generate, right? I think, yeah, certainly I don't know, Dave, whether you have played with the GPT 4.5. I would always think about you and GPT 4.5 competing for generating an ontology.
Thank you.
John Henry and the steam engine, you mean?
There you go. Yeah. But I was actually, I mean, obviously it is getting better. Certainly providing that upper ontology context, Michael, the way you said, is actually leading to a better result, better response from the GPT. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just out of my own curiosity, how do you mesh just with mathematical computation? Is there a way to designate like physical characteristics and say this is metal? These are the conductive properties of metal. So you can inference across materials for a specific manufacturing process. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, we have to basically derive. I mean, we used some of the higher level concepts, but we derived much more material. For example, engineering material with its properties. So for some of them, we use the upper classes as a starting point, but we further defined the engineering oriented classes, and those classes have the what you are looking for to ask questions like what you asked. Yeah.
Siva, you might want to have a look, if you haven't, of the more recent versions of GIST, because we've changed the unit of measure thing to be based on something we call aspects. And I think a lot of the engineering, the characteristics of material and processes and everything else are aspects that can be reasoned over in a pretty generalized way, I think.
Got it. Yeah, as you know, Siemens being a German company, there is a lot of emphasis on the engineering and the units of measure. So we actually also use some another, I forgot the name. Our team was using. Yeah. I think they're using that for the unit of measure. Yeah.
Phil, you want to have a word there with the how the unit of measures have been updated?
Yeah, we have a repository of reference data that's available to the public with units of measure, originally seeded from QUDT, but in QUDT you have lots of different namespaces, and actually there are a fair number of loose ends here and there. Take a look at it in it's called just reference data.
All right, thank you.
See, I had one other question. I remember when we were working, we were kind of getting into the specification and the spec entry part of the world, probably as part of, again, defining the properties of things. I was wondering if you ended up utilizing any of that notion of specification and specification entry, or if you went some other way.
Yeah, we are basically focused. If you remember, Mark, our initial focus was applying this to the search across multiple multi-domain data that connecting the links. So we will little bit did not that was the first part of it, but actually the specifications become a lot more important further when we want to automatically generate the specification from a design model.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we did not go to that level yet. Yeah. Yeah. But we did apply that. I mean, one of the things about we called it as cross-domain search, was all about discovering the links between the data that was created without the links. Can we infer links between the, for example, if I have a customer and I have a customer order, if there is no direct join table, can there, based on the information, can we infer that, right? So our focus was a lot about linking the data through these ontologies, and we were fairly successful. I think we could do a lot more, but we have proven it, and it is in production.
That's great. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Michael Sullivan.
Yeah, the UOMs and magnitudes is fantastic. This is going to allow us to mix and merge data from electric vehicles that are described in data from Europe and also described in data from the US. And they use different units of measure for the same aspect, which is to measure the efficiency of the vehicle. So I now have basically every electric vehicle. There's this wonderful generic term that's called energy efficiency, right, of the vehicle. And whether we get the data in kilometers, kilowatts per kilometer, or miles per kilowatt hour, it doesn't matter. Because you can basically do the transforms yourself, and that way we don't have to do anything in EL. We can basically keep the data as they prefer to describe it. Even in the US, there are different ways of describing energy efficiency. You've got things like E mile per gallon, which is versus kilowatt hours per mile versus miles per 100. I mean, the U.S. government uses different terms to describe efficiency. So this is fantastic because we don't have to deal with that on the ETL. It makes our applications much less fragile, and basically it's a huge win. There's still some things that we can tweak, and I think talking about specs and all that is certainly a way of adding to it. But right now, what you have is already good enough to start with.
That's great. And so are you using the reference data too, Michael, or just the ontology?
Oh yeah, we're using the reference
Excellent.
data. Yeah.
Great. That's great.
Absolutely.
And just so everyone else knows that I think the thing that's really surprising is that you can do those conversions in Sparkle. In the previous versions of GIST, for anything that was complex that had, multiple numerators and denominators, you would have had to write a recursive bit of code. But now everything's, right. You just do it in Sparkle.
Yeah, and in our case, all of our Sparkle is called through SQL. That's an Oracle thing, and so we can basically, instead of doing it in Sparkle, we can just do it in SQL, and
Sure.
All the normal stored procedure stuff that people are used to, you can do. So it's really exciting.
Wow, great!
It's nice to hear. I put the link in the chat, and there is a version 1.0.0 now. So we are going to have versions where you don't have to guess what's in a particular data set.
Or are you doing that versioning thing that I did a couple of weeks ago? Did I do it yet?
Not
Have I done
not
that presentation?
for
I can't
units of
remember now.
measure.
Yes, yes, you did, Dave.
Yeah, I
We're
did.
just
Didn't
talking,
I?
we're
Yeah.
just talking about GitHub versioning.
Oh, sorry. I thought he was talking about the data version, the shape
Nope.
version. Okay. You know, you could do that.
Yeah, just don't change the URIs, please.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yep.
Cardinal sin.
Yep.
Well, the analogy is a web page. You know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
you know, Oracle.com. You know, I don't care what version it is. That's where I want to go. And
Right.
if you want to put, you know, a #, version 2 after Oracle.com, then cool. Then you can do it that way. But
No, we don't version the IRIs of individual terms. We just version the ontology itself. But that
sure, yeah,
doesn't affect your usage of the terms.
Yep.
We have a few minutes left. Yakov, what domain are you particularly involved in? Since you were asking a lot about accounting and all these things.
Right now, my focus is academic, to create robust ways to deeply understand contracts. So that my focus on contracts as them being a sweet spot of understanding for a couple of reasons. And accounting is a great example of that. But I see accounting is not the only example of why contracts are important. Now, one nice thing about contracts, people think that they are complicated and they're difficult to understand because they speak a different language than most people. But in many respects, from many data sets which I wanted to create ontologies on, contracts actually are, I would say, the easiest to approach because they are very carefully created and very explicit. And so one point is that if you make a mistake, if you don't say what you really want in a contract, you may have to live with consequences. So you pay a lot of money for an expert to put information in that somebody else can understand it. So if it's a communication device, we have three parties, one party, two parties which agree between each other, and the contract is really clarifying all what they didn't think before their minds met. But you have the third party over there, which if the third party, the judge, misunderstands what you said between each other, then you lose a lot. It's very, very dangerous for you. So the contracts are naturally very clear compared to other ways of communication, where you may have unstated assumptions. So I'm just focusing. So I'm coming from data scientist coming from e-commerce, built domain models in the past for products, for e-commerce products, and now I just want to move into more. I think that starting with contracts and getting into business logic is better than describing e-commerce products with the current capabilities, prices, and what's going on. So my goal is to understand that, to build this model automatically as much as possible, and then apply it to work together with people who need something like this and apply it into real world applications like accounting or other business cases. But I believe that it's really business. It's not that accounting is just one important part of the business, but it's a part of business, and the contract is one point where everything meets as well. But so I'm not interested in the judge, how he will decide, but on the sort of understanding the business from starting at this one point.
Yep.
And that's the reason why I asked Dave whether he can confirm or deny the statement that contracts are essential, even if you're not speaking about accounting, but just about business.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, our target market, once we get this to work for ourselves, we're going to go after architects, but everything they do is derived from the contracts they engaged in. So, yeah. Rebecca.
Yeah, just because we're about to wrap up, I wanted to mention, I put a couple of links in the chat. These are links to our project planning Kanban boards for the next release of GIST. And if you go there, you can see what's planned and what we're still discussing, and you can comment on any of these issues. So it's a good way to see what's coming and maybe have some influence on decisions. And there are two of them just because we had been working on a 13.1, which would be a minor release, but then we are now moving to another major release 14, and we'll roll everything together. Right now they're separate. So have a look and see what is in the works.
And 3 minutes before we sign off. Oh, sorry, guys.
The second link is broken.
Josh, Ashley, was there anything you were looking for in particular prior to us closing out?
Okay, in my case, not really. I was just trying to understand a bit more about GIST and just understand a bit about the use cases and how to use it. And that's it.
Yeah. If you don't mind, can I make one observation and maybe request to Dave? Sure. Yeah. As we are moving into the generative AI with obviously GPT models, all kinds of things, right? The explicit knowledge that ontologies are capturing are a very, very, what do you say, like your GIST, it captures the whole domain very, very crisply, right? In a very small amount. I was wondering, is there any effort or any plans that you have in preparing the training data? Because we are always thinking about training domain-specific models. Obviously, we cannot use the trillion parameter models like GPT. So we are starting with even simple DeepSeek models or Llama models, smaller ones, but fine-tune them based on the ontology. I was wondering whether you guys are providing any technology and services and thought process for training domain-specific models, leveraging the existing ontologies.
Yeah, it's very timely because I just came from this conference and it's affecting me a little bit. I think we're going to be working on that in the very near future. I'll tell you one of the things that sort of blew my mind, and it shouldn't have, because you should go, oh yeah, duh, of course that's going to be true. But some people were reporting the incredible difference between RAG, where they were typically getting 50, 60%, correct answers out of their ChatGPT questions, and GraphRag, where they were getting on the order of 99% correct answer when they were posing questions to something. So this idea that your ontology really is the ground truth, it really is the guardrails for your LLM activity, I think is going to be a big message. Exactly.
We did actually that experiment using GraphRag, using ontology. You're exactly right. Accuracy went up several fold. Yeah. But also at the same time, we cannot send the ontology in every prompt. Particularly, we had a huge ontology. So in order to scope it down, for this particular question, what ontology is needed, that itself needs a schema RAG, figuring that out. So it is
and I think what we're probably going to be working on now is lots of smaller LLMs and even small language models, and in particular that at that first stage to figure out what query to ask of the triple store to bring back a smaller context, but a localized, contextualized one that's that's sufficient for the question you're asking.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be very interested, and hopefully you guys can post some information on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Before you go, Siva, one quick live stream that we did recently with Doug, Irina, and an engineer from Top Quadrant, Lori, is we talked about knowledge graphs as an enabler for data products. So, you can create a centralized enterprise knowledge graph, and then from there derive data products in certain shapes, so you can train any subsequent application, whether it's for machine learning or whatever it is that you're looking for. So,
did you say you put the link, or?
I'll put the link now.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Peter,
I was just wondering.
Last word.
Last one. Yeah. So from what Siva was saying and from what you were saying, Dave, about the importance of ground truth, what value added does an LLM actually give you over a decent knowledge graph in that situation?
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But yes, I know it's kind of funny. If you already have the guardrails, just go to the guardrails.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly think I've not seen that evaluation. I was wondering if Siva had any insights into that.
You mean the graph rag versus the regular thing?
No, what I'm saying is, Siva, if your ground truth is really what you're after and you've got that in the knowledge graph, why bother with an LLM?
No, I think so. Actually, the role of LLM is about adapting to various the variation in questions. And the ontologies and ground truth to capture the knowledge.
It's a preprocessor.
It is about application of the knowledge.
Yeah.
The LLM we are using it is how to apply that. For example, from taking a natural language question, it is able to generate, for example, Cipher or SQL. Sparkle code, right? Yeah, from that. So it could generate that, applying it correctly, understanding the intent of the question and also the bigger context. So I mean, there is a lot of together. The ontology technology and generative is highly complementary. I think right now, unfortunate to say, people are not able to harness that synergies so far. But there is a lot of good can come out of these two applying it together. Yeah.
And that's really interesting. So the point about it is that actually a small language model could probably do it.
Correct. I mean, particularly these small language models, the ontology is complementing its knowledge because it may have general knowledge, but a domain-specific knowledge it does not know. For example, if that is where ontology can complement that very well. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
I put the link in the chat. Thank you very much for attending.
I got it. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
That was a good session. Thanks for all the input. It was great. Cheerio.
Cheers.